Uh, I'm trying to even remember what movie this is from. We Mr. Braithwaite. I just remember that sentence, but very much used in the same way.
Did we?
Did we? So people will wander in. We'll get some humans. There'll be some. There it is. First and foremost, my mom, the kind of person I can take Kelly home to meet.
Perfect. Yes.
And I don't know what Kyle's showing off in the background there, but for a minute I thought it was something else. So,
I don't know. A bat?
It could be a juggling club. That's what I was thinking it could be.
So it's exciting today. We have
Backpack Show. Hey, who's on the show, Carrie?
You know what? Why don't you tell him?
So Kyle Shannon is a guy who runs a company called Storyvine. And one of the things I liked about Kyle was whenever I launched Story Leader, Kyle was like, we should totally talk about Storyvine. And every time I have a conversation like this with anyone else with story in the name, I fall asleep in the first 40 seconds. But Kyle really impressed me, not only just because he's cool and he knows a lot about storytelling. That's about the 2 of 3 nice things I'll say about him. The other is that wow, I've never seen that before. My screen's camera is going yellow. The other is that Kyle has this really cool software that does something I think business company organizations should have in play. Kelly Shibari, I had come speak at my conference the first time, I think in 2009 at one of my inbound marketing summits, and she came and answered a question that I had, which is she is an adult film star and model. And also I said, well, you have the same kind of challenge that places like the Wall Street Journal have. News is free everywhere. How do you convince somebody that they should pay for news? Same thing with porn. How do you convince someone to pay for porn? And I looped Kelly into a conversation just the other day with Sugar Jones, who I hope is here. She said she'd come by. And we were talking about how do people monetize in the new world. So it's really interesting. Our show thing, Carrie, has always been about alchemy. Like, how do we get two interesting people and, from very different mindsets? And we definitely have some people from some different spaces.
I don't know, a video expert and an adult star. I feel like that makes sense.
Well, I think, one thing that I asked Kelly about that, I said, what if this tech is really cool for porn? And even though Kyle will make the case that it probably will be, there's a lot of people who try and fail to make tech that is cool for porn, it turns out. So.
I feel like that industry is the one that tries everything first and figures out a way to make it useful. So, by the way, Kelly said this is as close as you get to it's not like a safe for work click, so don't click that.
Oh, right. Clubshibari.com, maybe don't
write this down with like a pencil.
All right, let's bring in Kyle first and drag him into this storyline, and then I will bother our dear Kelly after. So, hi, everybody. Hi, Rob. I did it. I hit the button. Hey, Kyle.
Hello.
So you gave me the demo on Storyvine, and I wasn't expecting to like it, and I liked it. One of the things I liked is
you commented, you're like, you went through a linear PowerPoint or whatever it was, a presentation, and you're like, normally I hate those and stop people, and you're like, yours I'm cool with. So thank you.
I hate people's PowerPoint decks. I think
you don't have to tell people that, by the way. You could just watch the thing, and if you are pleasantly surprised,
because I don't want to do it. I don't want to endure the slide, and I also want people thinking they're going to pitch me. I want them to know, I better not bring a deck with me. Because what's a deck do? Deck is like masturbation for 26 slides, and then finally something you want. And so it's we're so good and we won the industry, and
I'm just warming up the yellow card.
That card is going to come out.
I'm going to sprain my finger later.
Oh, Carol Alalof is here. It's her anniversary today. Happy anniversary! Happy wedding anniversary!
This is exactly what you should be doing on your anniversary.
Yeah, hanging out with us.
Go to clubkellyshibari.com.
Maybe that's what you do later after your anniversary.
That's right.
So listen, Kyle, Storyvine is, you're going to explain it differently, but the thing I like the most is that, and it was on that one slide that I think was awesome, was it takes the sort of velocity of user-generated content and the excitement and energy you can get out of user-generated content, and it takes the most important structure parts of pro video and marries them in the middle. Do you want to talk as briefly as you can about how you put together the Storyvine that exists today?
Yeah, sure. It's so the epiphany that led to Storyvine was basically when YouTube first came out. One of the things I recognized was most of the content on it sucked. And why it sucked was because people were mistaking hitting the record button for storytelling. And so the epiphany I had was, if you could provide someone with a framework, a basic sort of beginning, middle, and an end story structure that they could follow along with, it would make it much easier for people to tell their stories. Kind of the epiphany was short form video is going to be powerful. Storytelling is harder than it should be, and everyone has a story to tell. So is there a way we could democratize video storytelling? So Storyvine has an app that guides an end user through telling a specific story. So instead of just hitting the record button, we actually prompt someone how to tell a story. So let's say it's a patient story and you want that patient to talk about their diagnosis journey. Step 1, introduce yourself and, how long you've had the disease. Step 2, when were you diagnosed and how did that feel? Step 3, how did you treat it? So we literally walk someone through telling a story. And then all those clips go up to the cloud, and sitting up in the cloud is an empty shell of a video, and it gets automatically edited together in 5 minutes. So fully automated editing, but it's all based on the premise of breaking a story into little segments and walking someone through how to tell their story. So they don't have to get a degree in writing to be able to say, here's what it's like to be diagnosed with this horrible thing, or whatever the story might be.
Right. Now, one example you showed me that was a real world example was when Pete Buttigieg was still trying to run. You showed this thing where you basically, and this is the part I want to focus on. So you had these 4 layers, and you'll explain this to me after I make this horrible version of that.
That's okay. That's
basically, good. You ask good questions. The questions then get filled. So someone takes their camera or whatever, usually their phone, and they just shoot a thing. Hey, I'm Kyle. Hey, I'm Kyle from Texas. And then you get a bunch of those in a row. And then you make another clip that says, I voted for Pete. I'm voting for Mayor Pete because he has really nice socks, and whatever they say. And then, you get a lot of those. And then you get a bunch of different little clip answers. So then you can make like those, collage kind of videos that you are wanting to see, where it's like, hi, I'm Kyle. I'm Carrie. I'm Chris. I'm Kelly. And they kind of go through that thing. I'm voting for Pete. I'm voting for Pete. I'm voting for Pete because, right, you get that like great repeat effect. But your system does this in a lot of ways. So first, what are those 4 things that I can't remember in that order? And then let's talk about your database for a minute.
Okay, great. So the kind of the first thing is that idea that Storyvine is a hybrid product that lives in the space between professional video and UGC. The kind of 3 legs of the stool that are the technology. The first one is guided capture. So it's the guidance. So it's those prompted questions that show up in the app, and the app tells you, hold your phone this way, put your head in this dotted outline. So it literally tells you how to frame everything, and then it coaches you what to do. So that's leg 1 of a 3-legged stool. Leg 2 is we call auto magic editing. So basically, sitting up in the cloud is pre-designed, pre-edited video. And that's our whole technology is based on. There's a joke. There's a saying in video production called "We'll fix it in post." Like no matter what you've screwed up, you can fix it in post, right? And so with Storyvine, we kind of have this joke: we can fix it in because everything's pre-designed. The video is pre-designed. The story is pre-designed. All that needs to be filled in. It's like Mad Libs for video. So
pause right there, because that's super big. Like when you were saying all the things you said, I wrote only 1 note on my piece of paper because I'm a really bad note taker. All I wrote was we'll fix it in pre. Because to me, that's the hero expression, right? Because what you're saying is it's not going to be, you're not going to deal with it after the fact. It's going to be hit hard right up front. So,
and that's that piece of it. People that understand video production are the ones that have the hardest time getting their head around Storyvine, because what they're used to is let's get as much coverage as possible, right? Let's shoot 30 minutes of video that we know we're going to edit down in 2 minutes, because somewhere in there's going to be, with Storyvine, we're deciding up front what we want that end video to be, and then we're saying what little sound bites do we need to be able to tell that story? And those are the things we prompt for. So we flip video production upside down. So guided capture is 1, automated editing is 2, and then the 3rd leg of the stool, and this is kind of where you're headed, the database, everything that you're capturing ends up in a database, right? So you've got the fully edited video with all the graphics and all those clips stitched together, but you also have access to each individual segment that was recorded. So when you know that clip 1 is where the person introduces themselves, and clip 2 is where they talk about why they support Pete, and clip 3 is where they talk about their issue and why it's important to them. So as a video editor, you can go into that database and just pull sound bites very, very efficiently. You like these 4 people, and you want to get the segment where they say go vote for Pete. You can go do that very, very easily.
Susan's a video producer, and she wants to know more.
Yeah, and which you can follow up with Kyle after this. But no, one thing I want to ask about Kyle to this effect is we both had, in our conversation, it was kind of funny. It's a Goldilocks kind of story because UGC people don't understand how to edit things in a way that makes it, useful enough. And pros don't understand the value of doing it this format and this way where you just shoot what you need. It's they would rather make a lot of poop and sift through for the corn. And you say, why don't we just get some corn? And I think it's
also there's an interesting thing with Storyvine that I've kind of learned over the years. It doesn't corn in the poop got the yellow card. That was
I guess so.
I don't know if you want to use that as your next tagline. So
yeah, yeah, we're just the corn, all the corn, none of the poop.
All corn, no poop.
That's it. TM. One of the things we found, what Storyvine is really good for is not, if you want to tell one story really, really well, that's traditional video production. But if you want to do something like a customer testimonial, well, they're always the same, right? The customer testimonial is always like, here's when I became a customer, here was my awesome experience, and you should definitely go buy this thing, right? So it's always, a lot of stories are the same kind of recipe. So Storyvine is very good at replicable stories. So if you've got the same kind of thing you're telling over and over and over again, that's what Storyvine's good at. And it's the other thing that you and I talked about, Chris, is a lot of the social media apps, a lot of the UGC video apps are very much about sort of that real-time moment. It's much more informal. Like, I want to say something, hit the record button, get it out to the world. Storyvine is actually a co-created piece of media where the organization says, here's the kind of story I want you to tell, and I'm going to create the framework for you to tell it. So here's the story I want you to tell on my terms. Are you willing to do that? And then if someone is, they come in and they go, yeah, I'm willing to do a custom, testimonial for your company. And then they follow the little recipe, and they are just, all their job is to authentically share their experience following those little prompts. And then the video that's produced is this kind of collaboratively created piece of content. But it's very intentional storytelling. It's not as informal as just hit the record button and go. You're sort of signing up to say, I'm willing to tell my story on behalf of that organization or movement or company or whatever it might be.
So I do want to skip backwards a little bit into the Kyle Shannon origin story. Shortly after you were bitten by the radioactive spider, you have a background. I mean, you had agency stuff, agency.com and all that. You have a background in storytelling. And one of the things that I kind of posted when I was talking about this conversation today is a lot of companies say they want storytelling. A lot of companies agree that story is useful. I mean, in my talks about Story Leader, I can get every leader in a room to nod and not every leader in a room to spend the money. Yeah. But you decided, that you were going to take your storytelling knowledge and codify it in software. Basically, you can't not do it this way, essentially, because you've probably been selling one-offs forever. What was that epiphany like?
Yeah, that was huge. Well, it's actually been 15 years in the making. I was thinking about this since our conversation last week. I got a degree in acting, so I started out learning how to tell other people's stories. Then I decided, I'll write myself an acting career. Wrote 7 screenplays and decided to write my own stories. Then I started an online magazine where I was, curating other people's stories. Then I did agency.com where I was talking, telling the stories of big brands in an interactive environment. And so what Storyvine is I realized, could I create something that helps lots of other people tell their stories? And the basic idea, the original idea, I started a non-automated version of this in 2006 called Episodic Studios that was an abject failure. But the idea was if you could templatize shows, you could replicate them and scale video production. So I was pitching NASCAR about doing fan-generated shows. I was pitching CNN about doing, political coverage at every level of politics. And then I got my first job with New Line Cinema, which was super cool. And it was entertainment content. And I'm in the sort of first half of my first day where I had flown all this equipment and gear out to LA to film my first thing. And I had one of those Arrested Development moments where I was like, oh my God, I've made a terrible mistake. I realized as long as you're manually filming someone with gear, manually dealing with those massive files that are created and manually editing, it doesn't matter how templatized it is, it doesn't scale. So the kind of the first thing I learned was you literally can't scale video production if you're doing it manually. And so I shut the company down. Like I'd spent a year and a half and a lot of money like putting a company together, only to realize when I got my first paid job, I'd shut it down because it wasn't viable. And then Storyvine is that idea of like, well, what if you could automate everything? And then you can, but it's not based on AI, right? It's not based on technology figuring out what was said. It's based on Aristotle, right? Here's a basic story framework, literally like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, like the beginning, middle, and end of the story. You spoon feed that framework and then just let people talk. But yeah, you have to follow the recipe. So Storyvine, if nothing else, is kind of like a recipe box for video storytelling. And then you sort of pick the recipe, or as the company, you get to design your recipes. You put them out to the world, people tell their stories, and then you as the organization get to curate those stories.
Kyle, would this work for someone who's interested in monetizing their content? Like perhaps a lot of people who are now wanting to be in the adult industry, but are finding it difficult, barriers to entry, to have actual production value to their stuff. Could you theoretically use it for anything?
Yeah, you can theoretically use it for anything. Like I said, it's better at the replicable stuff. But we've had kind of an internal quasi joke.
I don't know. Porn is pretty formulaic. I don't know when the last time you looked.
Yeah, what we've talked about was we've sort of jokingly talked about, but kind of half seriously. We could easily put together the equivalent of Porn Maker, right? And Porn Maker is, step one, film the awkward introduction where the delivery guy shows up at the door. And step two, get into it. By the time you get to step 6, there's your money shot. Go. So you could absolutely walk someone through. And that's the kind of thing. People that understand storytelling understand that there's a structure. I mean, you've put on this show, there's a whole structure for when you throw yellow cards and how you lay people out and who you bring in, right? That was the whole impetus behind Storyvine was, listen, there's an existing format for television sitcoms. There's an existing format for 1-hour shows and 2-hour movies. No one had done that short form video. And so the idea of Storyvine is it's taking basic story structure. If you know nothing about storytelling, fine, just answer questions and a video's made. If you do know about storytelling, you can sort of recognize it. That's a little mini, hero's journey. I get it. So yeah, you can apply that to porn. You can apply that to a nonprofit. You can, we've talked to a number of religious.
Anything where the plot is really important. I get it.
Well, no, not necessarily, because I was just thinking about, so Paul's, I can't even remember the number. He's like tasted over 100,000 wines or something like that. He runs a big wine organization and does a lot with tastings and those kinds of events. And so you can imagine the sort of UGC internal input of that is, hey, I tried this, and I've been told for years that I should try a Malbec and blah blah blah. And so he could have, based on wine types, based on people types, based on whatever. I think what Kyle's platform does well is that, and I didn't really get my question in about it, about the database, but like you can thread and curate this in a lot of different ways once you have the raw content.
Mm-hmm. Total. Well, and in fact, I don't know if I told you this, but you just set up. So we're launching our first self-service product right after Labor Day. And so Storyvine right now is a bespoke product, right? As an organization, you sign up, we custom build templates for you. It's very hands-on. The product we're launching after Labor Day is called Storyvine Now, and it's pre-built template kits. And one of the kits that we're building, it's a set of 4 different kits for craft wine, beer, distilleries, and food. And the kit will have 3 templates in it. And so the craft wine template will be a customer testimonial. So like, here's why I like this particular wine. A tasting, like a wine tasting template. So, someone at the org can do wine tastings, or customers could. and then a meet the staff template. So here's the vintner, or here's the marketing assistant, whoever you want to meet from the thing. But the whole idea with Storyvine now is you swipe your credit card, upload your logo, you've got access to those 3 templates, and you go make as many videos as you want.
Can you do that while tipsy?
So thank you for seeing that.
How many glasses of Malbec in can I be?
Yeah, exactly.
And still do this.
And you can have a lot of fun with that, especially brands that have, passionate followers. You can leverage that passion and say, hey, would you be willing to do this? Yeah, I'd be willing to do it. Okay, here's a tool. Just download this app. We've signed you up for that template, and just answer the questions and you're off to the races. And what's cool is, because people are coming in knowing that they're going to tell a specific kind of story, they tend to be ready for it. And we've had very few people go off the rails. It's, sort of back to the porn maker thing. One of the early, sort of pieces of feedback I got when I was starting Storyvine was everyone said, oh, you're going to get all these junk shots, and you'll have all this inappropriate content. And the reality is we've had almost none. Because people are coming in intentionally to say, I'm telling my patient journey, or I'm coming in to do a customer testimonial.
Right.
And I think one of the reasons people get sophomoric on video is that they don't want to look stupid. So they do something really stupid.
Isn't sophomoric stupid? I thought sophomoric
no.
acting.
It is.
What he's going to say is that they're cutting themselves off at the pass. They're doing it for themselves.
They don't want to look silly, so they just do something ridiculously silly, because then they can just forgive that. But what people don't want to do is go in and talk about whatever, being diagnosed with a disease, and just where do I start? I don't want to feel stupid. So part of the philosophy of Storyvine is you don't have to think about anything. Just introduce yourself and where you live. Oh, okay, I can do that. And then the person can do as many takes as they want on that little segment before they move on to the next. So the whole idea is lower the anxiety for the story maker, the person telling their story, and then dramatically increase the quality of the storytelling and the consistency of it.
You know what else works for that is wine.
Wine.
Yeah,
we can do that.
Reduce the anxiety.
All right, again, that's why I think that kit's going to work good.
Kyle Shannon runs Storyvine, and you can check out a lot more about it at storyvine.com. You can find at Kyle Shannon everywhere. On the Twitters, his company is at Storyvine Inc. Go find that as well. Kyle, if you can stick around, do. If you can't, get the hell out of here. Either way, I'm kicking you backstage because I have the
If you can't, that's a shame, and we're very sad.
Yeah, we like it when you stick around because we do sort of a 4-person panel near the very end. And I mean, think about it. Steve Garfield from stevegarfield.com is here, so why would you leave? Now.
I wouldn't. I mean, I'm here. I'm sticking around.
And Kelly's here, so it's a party. Hey, Kelly Shibari, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. It is super early. It's early even for porn hours. Under normal circumstances, we'd probably just still be awake from the night before. But
it'd be the night before still, right?
Huh?
I mean, it would be the night before still in some ways, right? Because usually it's you kind of get your hours sleep in the vampire days, like in the late mornings or something.
Yeah. Well, in the years before quarantine, because it feels like it's been years.
True.
We would be doing an appearance that would go late into the night, and then if somebody said, "Oh, you need to be on a podcast at 7 a.m. Pacific time,"
F you. That's what the answer to that is.
So, but since we've been in quarantine, I actually did get some sleep.
So one of the, I guess we have to kind of address the Kyle thing, and also, Carrie saying that, porn is formulaic. Porn's changed a lot over the years. Porn has really gone through, I mean, the halcyon days of the 70s, for instance.
Oh, sorry. I don't watch as much as you. So.
Well,
I haven't seen the evolution.
Very telling listening to you guys talking, because I was like, oh, this is such a generational conversation.
Yes.
And everybody who is probably in their early 20s is listening to that portion going, no. I mean, we still have studios that make, what you would consider formulaic porn with the storyline, like the pizza boy comes to the door. that storyline's never, ever going to go away, because it's something that as consumers, everybody's gotten so used to. That's the buildup, that's the time when you can go and get whatever it is that you need to get ready to do whatever you need to do when you watch porn. But because of things like the original Vine and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook Live, and
you gotta get right to the point.
Yeah, I mean, it's less about building up the story. It's the understanding that most porn consumers don't need 20 minutes to get where they need to go when they use porn. right?
I was just watching American Werewolf in London, and they had this part where it's a really famous scene where they're sitting in an adult theater, and the guy's seeing all the people that he mauled, and but on the screen the movie makes no sense, and I forgot that completely until there's like a guy comes in naked and he realizes he's in the wrong room, like he's all mad at the woman, and then he looks at her face and he's like, "Oh, sorry."
Right.
And that stuff keeps happening, and I had forgotten about it completely.
Yeah, old school porn really was theatrical. You used to go to theaters in San Francisco. There were people that owned adult movie theaters that you actually paid a ticket. You went and sat in. In the industry, we used to call them raincoaters because most of them wore raincoats when they went in for obvious reasons. And now everybody seems to purchase their porn not even on a TV. Most of them use their phones. So it means that shorter content is, more instant gratification is even more instant than it used to be.
Right. Well,
but, how isn't that sad for women everywhere?
Right. Well, and also like the kind of adult entertainment has changed, right? Where for like the 70s and the 80s, most of, and probably well into the early 2000s, most porn was meant for men, meant for cisgender heterosexual men. And porn these days is for everybody. If you want to find something that involves purple people eaters who like eating bananas, you'll find that. You'll find furries, you'll find a little bit of everything. So you're able to find what it is that turns you on. And so that actually means that we now have even more creators than before, which is great.
There's a related to that, and I was rushing to try to look it up, but I'm not the researcher that Carrie is. Pornhub just announced, speaking of the fact that the difference between women's satisfaction and male satisfaction, Pornhub was doing this project where they were kind of altering their site a little bit to kind of denote how men tend to not be in it for helping the woman find their satisfaction. Should that be the configuration? And they were trying to draw attention to that, like, hey guys, you got to up your game a little bit, which is, I find interesting, especially given that this is, people's external view of Pornhub is not to be an educator of, equalitative sex, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, and tube sites in general, when it comes to the adult industry, are not necessarily looked upon as positive things. We don't tend to mention those websites, Chris Brogan.
Right.
But even those, a lot of the bigger tube sites have changed their marketing and monetization tactics in terms of how they work with creators. Where when they first came into the scene, a lot of studios ended up having to shut down. A lot of independent producers ended up having to close up shop and look for another line of work because when piracy becomes the norm, and as a whole, the consumers don't particularly care for creators, then it hits us in our pocket, right? But even companies like the one you mentioned have developed like a model program where they actually work with creators and they actually monetize off of ad revenue. And so so creators who use that platform through their service will actually get paid through like views, which they never used to do before. So that's definitely, even those tube sites, which it's definitely generational. Old school porn people absolutely hate tube sites, and I don't blame them. Whereas I've had conversations with like these 22, 23-year-old content creators who use that platform specifically to drive traffic and specifically to monetize. It's definitely a big culture war going on between the generations in the industry, but some people are coming around.
Kelly, we had pro wrestler Taylor Hendrickson, and she's youngish. I can't remember her age. It was like 22, 23, 24. She was very different than her sort of protege past WWE people insofar as, you trust the entity to bring you your bread and butter, and she couldn't. No one can anymore, and that's, I think, also true of the new generation of people making adult content. It's changed dramatically since the your very first time making revenue on your work. It's very different how you have to kind of work to get a buck right now, and it's a lot harder, is what I understand. Can you talk through a little bit about the kind of revenue opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually was a late bloomer. I didn't get into the industry until I was in my mid 30s, because before that, I actually worked in Kyle's line of work in mainstream Hollywood as a production designer. And the only reason I kind of stepped into the adult industry is because we had a giant writer's strike. And I needed to find, not just me, but like a bunch of other people needed to find something else to do so we wouldn't cross a picket line. But back then it was still, pretty much the studio system. You were hired by an agent represented you, or you had a studio book you. You went to set. You had like a suitcase full of clothes that they could pick out of. You did your scene. You knew exactly what was going to happen that day. And then you went home and you either got paid the same day or you got a paycheck in the mail in a couple of weeks afterwards. But it was very similar to what's considered a commercial buyout in mainstream production, where you get paid a lot more than what you would normally get paid as an actor, because then the studio owns all of your content. Whereas now, it's very cool on one hand because you have all of these different platforms that you can use and this amazing new tech. Like you shoot pretty much anything on a phone these days. So you don't necessarily need the equipment. You don't necessarily need the platform of a studio to promote your work. But at the same time, there's also now this giant learning curve where you need to figure out how to use the equipment that you've been given, because there's no school for porn. And there's and because there are no studios, but a glut of platforms. OnlyFans is only one of like a dozen other platforms, and they all offer something a little bit different. And so it's very important not to just figure out how you're creating content, but also how your fans want to consume that content. I think it's very similar to music these days. Like, do you use Spotify? Do you use Pandora? Do you use SoundCloud? And why do you pick one platform over the other as a consumer? As a creator, you also need to know why your fans choose one platform over the other, and see if you can kind of work with those platforms to give them the content that they want. So it becomes a much more interactive experience than it ever was when I was working with studios.
So the way I talk business a lot of times in these kind of revenue collection methods is it's a lot more like tapas. You have to get a lot of little bites,
Yes.
To equal your meal. And that must be kind of tricky. One other thing I thought about when you were talking about the sort of younger generation of creators is that they're not unlike YouTubers and Twitch streamers and that sort. Would you say that there's a lot more in common with that than there is how you got started?
Oh yeah. And I think also, the quarantine's definitely changed. I mean, I know that that's a topic for everybody on every podcast, but the quarantine's definitely changed how we not only consume adult entertainment, but also how we create it. One of the things that I had heard, I had taken a 4-year sabbatical. So for me, getting back into porn this year, not only is like the worst timing on the planet, but is also the platforms that are available to me to use have also kind of shifted the way they offer their content as well. For example, like OnlyFans, my understanding of OnlyFans was that it was supposed to be an add-on experience for consumers on top of like regular, like old school membership sites where you sign up for like a monthly subscription and you get like a couple of professionally produced scenes per week. But OnlyFans and those kind of like for fans type sites were supposed to be these like add-on things, so that if a fan is a fan of your membership site, he could then sign on to your OnlyFans for a glimpse into your day-to-day, like a lot of behind the scenes, a lot of, oh, she's doing yoga today, or oh, she's making lunch today. It was more supposed to be for that. So it was a much more interactive experience with fans. Whereas now, with the studios kind of shut down, everybody's OnlyFans is also turned into their membership sites if they don't have one already.
Right.
But on membership sites, you don't have the interaction that you have with fans. You don't have like a chat feature. You don't have the ability to do a live show. And this is kind of what I mean about different platforms offering different solutions is, OnlyFans offers a live streaming capacity, but they don't offer a way for you to sell DVDs or merch, right? But then another platform would offer merch opportunities, but no camming platform. So right now, like, especially ever since the quarantine, there's just been more and more websites that have been launching that not necessarily compete with OnlyFans, but go, hey, you see what OnlyFans has? Well, do you see what this other site has? Well, we've merged it, and now you can only have one place. I recently had a chat with a website called peep.me, and they're going with a much more inclusive, feminist approach, I guess, is their platform, which is that the CEOs profit share just as much as the content creators. And so much more of a collective. So again, you're having all these different platforms that cater to different communities within the creator community, which is great.
It's interesting too that to your point about the sort of different people creating the different sites, and you'd said earlier about like just that there's something for everyone out there. It's interesting that with that you get, for instance, sites that have an LGBTQ forward kind of agenda, or sites that it used to be that porn, like you said, was almost entirely cis male product, and that for instance, trans porn was never any real thing for a long time. The documentary Circus of Books, talking about the first adult bookstore on the West Coast of any real merit, that that became a social scene as well.
And even assuming that trans porn automatically means trans women.
That's correct.
There's been a huge experience of people who are trans men also now being creators. And so in a weird way, it's porn has actually been very big in the acceptance movement, at least behind the scenes.
So our friend Steve Garfield from stevegarfield.com had popped up this one, Carrie. I was hired to do I'm not touching that button, Carrie.
I did. You missed it.
Do it again. I want to read it out loud.
No,
I'm touching it.
I'll cover her entire body.
It's fine.
Her face included.
Not the last time she heard that. It was I was hired to do some porn.
If your kids have to cross
editing
through, have them come now.
from HBO documentary Real Sex Presents Porn 101. The video editor in the film they were documenting did not show up, so they asked me to fill in, and that's how I got my start in porn. That's a good jump question to ask you the question of how much of this is you didn't touch how much of this is ad hoc? How much of people getting to this career is ad hoc? Because oddly, I would say probably more people aspire to this in a way that they couldn't in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Meaning this is a path now that wasn't available, or do people just land there because someone said they should be a model?
Oh, I think it's like every person has a different story on how they got in. Some people got in because their boyfriend or their partner wanted to get into porn and wanted a scene partner, and they said, or they wanted to create like a Zach and Miri kind of situation of like just creating porn for themselves, and then it kind of goes viral. I wouldn't say that there's actually just one kind of person that gets into porn, and especially now with all these content creator sites that allow not safe for work content, you now have safe for work content creators using the same platform. So now you have musicians and chefs and yoga instructors using sites like OnlyFans, because it's a payment. It's less about the platform. Oftentimes it's more about the payment processing. Is when you're, say, for instance, a yoga instructor, like if you're a safe for work, not an adult entertainer, and you want to start your website to have an online portal for people to sign up to your yoga classes. So you're not just teaching yoga classes in your suburb, right? You need to apply for Visa and MasterCard to be able to take your payments, right? And so a lot of people will use a website like CC Bill, which is adult friendly, but it's also not also mainstream friendly.
Right.
If you go through that process, it ends up costing you an easy $3,000 to $5,000 just to get started. Whereas like you can go to like a site like OnlyFans or Just for Fans or Peep.me and launch same day. And all the payment processing is already there. The only thing that you need to figure out with all these different platforms is which platform takes what cut. So currently OnlyFans takes a 20% cut. So you get to keep 80%, which is profoundly high. Foxy.me, I think has, or Foxy.co has an 83% payout. Peep.me has a 90% payout. It's so different from before all these platforms came out, where like the standard understanding as an adult entertainer is if you work with a webmaster, it was 50-50.
50-50. Yep.
And they did all the marketing and everything and all the hosting of the website and everything for you, but you only got to keep 50% of what you got from your fans. A platform like OnlyFans or Peep.me really is good because not only can you start right away, you don't need as much equipment. You don't need to invest as much. If you try it for like a month or two and it really doesn't work out, or 6 months and it really just doesn't work out for you, you can drop it and you don't feel like you've lost any money because there's technically no investment money involved in using those sites.
The mechanics of payment are really important, though. There's actually been calls for credit cards to freeze payments for porn sites and stuff.
Yeah.
It's not easy to
Well, and
get.
that's one of those-
Even people want to give you their money for stuff,
Right.
which is like not a given. It's
Yeah,
hard to
I
make it
actually
happen.
had an experience with a fan who was like, I don't know what's going on with my credit card, but it's not going through on OnlyFans. So then I had to find a different portal that accepted tips and go, what can you use this? And OnlyFans was eventually able to get back to him because they're inundated with customer service requests too. So he was able to fix the problem that he had. So he didn't have to go to another platform. But as content creators, we have to have those backup in case something happens with our fans as well.
Kelly, I think that not a lot of people would think about, well, I think there's a lot of sort of presumption on what they think your life is like when you're not doing your actual job. I think they think that you just, walk around looking for sex all day and your spare time is on all the sex websites and all that. But, knowing you for as many years as I have, I mean, you are into the same stuff all my nerd friends are, nerd stuff notwithstanding, but tech futurism, where products and services are going, what kinds of things are, political stuff, everything. I mean, it's so strange because so many people haven't really met someone who has your career.
Right.
They don't realize, the kinds of things you might talk to a person like you outside of your job.
Right. Well, that's, when you work for studios, that's definitely the case. You're only presented to the fans in a way that the studios want to present you, which is a hypersexual person that wants to go out and that's their 24/7 lifestyle. But when you actually talk to the people in the industry, you realize that and you get this a lot from performers who are new to the industry first. They'll be like, oh, I want to live the porn star lifestyle. When the reality of a porn star lifestyle is literally getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and working until probably 1 or 2 in the morning. And you're managing everything, whether it's your content creation, your marketing, your PR, your social media presence, especially these days, like hiring, booking your own co-stars. You're doing all of that yourself. So that takes up so much of your day.
So what's dating like? You must just be like, can we just watch Dancing with the Stars?
I don't date.
Don't want.
Some performers do, some performers escort, some performers date, some performers go like me, when I'm performing. I don't mix business and my personal life. So, yeah. Again, it takes all kinds. Every single performer is a little bit different. Which is fantastic for consumers because you can get whatever you want whenever you are looking for it. So,
and there's been, I think we talked about this briefly one time, and I've talked about it with others. I read this article that says that there's people who are now just looking for intimacy more than porn. There's a whole sort of class of young Japanese workers who they're so tied to their business that they don't really have time for a traditional girlfriend. So they kind of pay for a much more wholesome version of the phrase girlfriend experience.
Oh, well, that happens here in the States too. There are giant industries with people who are focused more on their careers than starting a family right away. Firemen in particular work like a 24 on, 48 off shift. They're really concentrating, like every fireman I've ever met has been this way. They're really focused on going up the ladder, so to speak, and are not necessarily interested in getting married or having kids and having those obligations. And so while they're waiting, they'll look for a girlfriend experience as opposed to a real girlfriend. And
does that cost more or less?
Oh, that's interesting.
That depends. I mean, if you court somebody and you get married and you have kids, that comes with a certain dollar amount over the course of your lifetime. If you don't want to go that way and you instead want to hire an escort or have a girlfriend experience that's virtual online with either a cam girl or these days with people like on sites like OnlyFans, you can do that. And it really depends. Would you much rather spend, and these are like ballpark numbers, would you much rather spend $200 to $300 for an hour of your virtual girlfriend's time once a week? Or do you want to spend kind of, and you know exactly what you're getting and she's giving you exactly what you want? Or do you want to spend that kind of money and wine and dine a girl that you met on OkCupid? I mean, it's a different goal.
He might not give you anything at all.
He might not give you anything at all, but if your goal is to get married and to have children, an adult entertainer might not be the person that you're seeking that from, and it probably shouldn't be who you're seeking that from. So depending on what your goal is. I mean, I personally think the dollar amount ends up being about the same over the course of it.
It's really interesting to think of the dollar and cents of relationships in that way. But, you know, as time progresses and as there are more ways to look at, you know, the construct of a relationship, I mean, it's not as weird as it used to be. Kyle, we dragged you back in, buddy. You're forefront here. You're here and alive. Glad you are. Thank you for sticking around.
Thank you.
You both have a mutual appreciation of technology and where it goes. What has the pandemic and the lockdown and the extended realizations that have stemmed from it, what has it meant for either of you? Kyle, maybe you first, I guess. What has it meant, or what do you see, or what have you observed that you didn't think was going to be the way the world was going to work?
I think I was watching the Brian Solis episode you did. There's, you know, it accelerated a lot of the changes that were already coming. So that was kind of expected, but I think like everything, like it happened overnight. So like a lot of the changes that happened, I thought, oh, this will happen over the next 10 years. It was like, bang. Couple other things for me, you know, I kind of feel like for businesses, it was literally this sort of random coin flip. And you were either on the side of the coin where your business got more relevant, or you were on the side of the coin where it's like, you got to figure something else out quick, and kind of nothing in between. And so that's been kind of fascinating. So because I have a video technology, I've been doing a daily video diary of what it's like to be an extrovert in isolation. And I thought I would be doing it for 3 or 4 weeks. I just did episode 147, and like it's been months, and like I don't see any end in it anytime soon.
I don't see anybody. Nobody talks to me.
Oh my god, yeah, it's just crazy. and then the last one, I shared this on my daily diary, where I think the biggest thing for me is it took me a couple of months to realize this, that the lack of physical interaction means that you don't have these kind of phases, these mile markers where something is different. Like if I was going to go to an event in Philadelphia, like a 3-day conference, you know, you would go to the airport, you would get on the plane, you'd go there, you'd have the experience in the hotel. Like physically something changed. And what's going on now is that like the distinction between going to an online conference, doing a live TV show with Chris Brogan, getting a client, losing a client, they're all identical from an experiential standpoint. You're sitting at your desk, you're either on the phone or on a camera or sending emails. So there's like nothing that's sort of regulating for me mentally because of the lack of physical changes. So for me, that's been a recent insight, and I don't know what to do with it because I don't know quite how to change it other than I go out, and then when I go out, I feel uncomfortable because some people aren't wearing masks and there's aggressive weirdness and fights. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to stay in. So
stay in. But Kelly, you had said that you were relaunching your career in adult content and that it was the pandemic was like the worst time. It might be like a pretty good time because it wasn't all of a sudden like consumption of that kind of content was up.
It's a good time because these platforms exist. You know, if the platforms didn't exist, I'd be like, well, I guess I'm just going to go back to doing PR, which I still do. But I had really wanted to come back to content creation, and we had made plans of like after the January award show season that I would be making an announcement, and that didn't happen. But we're now also experiencing kind of like what Kyle says. We're you know, AVN just announced that they're going to be doing their first virtual award show and conference in January. So, you know, especially on the heels of CES shutting down this year. So I think that's going to be the next like interesting thing to watch because I've never seen a fully successful virtual adult conference yet. I've attended industry only conferences where it's mostly panel discussions and workshops and things like that. But when you include the fans, I don't know what that looks like. So I'm really excited to see what January is going to look like in terms of AVN. I'm sure they're all tearing their hair out right now, trying to figure out how to make it work correctly. but you know, I'm the opposite of Kyle in that I'm an introvert during the quarantine. So
so you're great. You're like, this is the best thing ever.
I'm doing fine. But on a business level, it's definitely a little bit more of an uphill battle for me to try to figure out how to reach my fans in the way they want to be approached.
Right.
So yeah, so that's kind of my hurdle right now.
Kelly, it was funny when you were saying something about making an announcement. I was planning on making an announcement. You're kind of the last generation of people who an announcement, like someone would give a shit about an announcement. I was just thinking, like, you know, all these, like, you know, it sounds like I'm demeaning them, and I kind of am, but I'm saying, like, they're all just like a bunch of little people that we don't really know, and that, you know, they have their fans and they have their bases and they're doing as well or not as air, but you're a performer that people pay attention to and that gets clocked in the news, gets written up in magazines all over the place. You're kind of the cutoff of that generation, aren't you?
I think I might be, but also when I say announcement, I only mean like within the industry. So it's more of a call out. It's more of a call.
You're not talking to Anderson Cooper. I get it, but you know,
it's more of like a press release that goes out. That's a call to action for like directors and producers to go, oh, she's available again. It's less for the fans. With the fans, the only thing I really had to do was launch my OnlyFans and a couple of other platforms and make an announcement on Twitter that I was back, and they came and have been amazingly supportive. So
how big a problem is scraping of content? Like, you see Reddit and you see all these other places where people just rip content and re-upload it.
That's kind of what I mean is the last time, Brogan, when you and I actually went to Inbound Marketing Summit and a couple of those other web conferences, that was like the beginning of like tube sites and a lot of piracy happening, and people in the industry trying to figure out their way around how to work around that. Whereas now it's less about the producers trying to figure out their workarounds. It's more about every single content creator trying to figure out what works best for them. I think, you know, OnlyFans, I think, has been only like they've been around for less than 5 years, I think. Or they're right at the 5-year mark. And so I think we're still in that infancy of trying to figure out what's the biggest site that we should all be on, what site can offer everything at once. So we're not asking our fans to go to 7 different sites to get all of our content.
Right. That's interesting because that's a very similar thing probably that Kyle had to deal with a lot, and that I know I've had to answer a million different times, which is, what's the next site after Twitter? Who cares? I don't care. In yours, there's a kind of reason why aggregation matters. Kyle, that's why you've built yours to be, we can put it wherever we can put it. You know, that's how it's built, right?
Yeah, and you know what we're focusing on is the content creation, less about the distribution. But if I kind of look at my crystal ball about how Storyvine evolves, I think we increasingly will have to have a complete product, which probably does include distribution, or at least includes much deeper hooks and sort of back channels from distribution platforms, so that from our platform you can see how things are performing out in the world. So yeah, I think that I think it's all evolving. I mean, the real fact of the matter is no one knows anything right now, and because of the pandemic, it's even less so. But just if you go back and just look at kind of the evolution of blogging, when blogging first came out, journalists were like, "That's not real journalism." There was this whole.
That's how they said it too.
Yeah,
that's how they said it.
Yeah.
But bloggers were just these hacks, and then that evolved, and journalists started blogging, and all of a sudden it gained some credibility. So I think you see these cycles of something new comes into the scene, everyone kind of poo-poos it, and I remember when the Grammys, the head of the Grammys came out. I don't know, this is probably in the early 2000s or late 90s, but he came out and said, "You evil kids, downloading our music, you're ruining the industry." This is pre-streaming, right? And now the industry's evolved. So I think Kelly's right that kind of the evolution of this, we kind of don't know where we are. There, we will see these things sort of rise and fall, but the old models are gone, and we just don't quite know what the new models look like yet. So I think everyone is in this state of trying to figure it out. And
the young kids have and that makes me obviously the old person. They know all the platforms before we do. Like for us, it's like go back and trying to learn a new language. Whereas like the kids who have been like on Vine and TikTok, they've got it all figured out, And so for us, it's more like, can you teach us? That would be great.
They get immediately snotty too if a platform is like kind of 5 minutes ago and you mention it, they're like, ugh, nobody's on that anymore.
Like that was Twitter.
That was amazing. That. Oh, sorry, Kelly. Go ahead.
You're seeing people who actively are vocal about their complaints about specific platforms. You're seeing, occasional bursts of complaints about OnlyFans and occasional bursts of complaints about other platforms, and other platform developers are reading all of those and trying to adapt those to their new platforms. But we're also, in the infancy now, again, of like trying to figure out where we can advertise our product. FOSTA SESTA has been a huge burr in our side because it's prevented, it's kind of pushed us back into the old school, you can only advertise in certain zones of the town. Whereas when Twitter first came out and Facebook, everybody was like, oh, it's like a free-for-all. We can now advertise in the main public marketplace. And now with FOSTA SESTA, even mainstream writers are being throttled from how much sex and relationship writing they can do. So you don't see as much of the glut of interviews that you used to see in mainstream, like on Cosmo or Rolling Stone, with adult entertainers, because the writers have been let go.
Wow.
So for us, we're now learning, like Carrie was saying, like learning how to advertise on Reddit, learning how to advertise on different social media platforms, and hoping that those don't get deplatformed or demonetized for adult content creators.
It's a little like cannabis, huh? You got to like dance around it. You got to call it something else.
It's nuts. It's very much like that. You're totally right. All right, listen, it's that time of the show. The show's almost over. This is where we talk a little bit about what goes in the backpack for the next 5 years. 1 or 2 people have ever taken something back out of the backpack, but you're invited to put something in. My 5 things that'll come in my upcoming book about the backpack are story, collaboration, autonomy. You have to kind of make the world your own. Manchu, an Okinawan word that means one family, not a Japanese word I found out by every Japanese speaking friend I have. Execution, things that one has to do. So those are mine. Kyle, Shannon, I guess let's start with you. What's something that we should put in the backpack for people to use for the next 5 years? What one trait or idea or thought should they be moving forward?
It kind of lives inside story, but it's authenticity.
Oh, okay.
And it's sharing less what you think people want to see because you want to find that audience, and just sharing what's authentic to you because your audience will find you. And I think there are increasing, I think we're seeing more and more of this. But it's also really hard. It's really scary to be authentic. So it's that Brene Brown vulnerability thing. But I think when it comes to self-expression, doing it from an authentic place, not a place of where you think you need to do it for this audience or that. It's just do it, and the audience will find you.
That's so funny, Kyle, because somebody just asked me, what is it about being a visible influencer? Like, how do you talk to your, how do you attract your target audience? And I said, oh my God, who the hell cares? And she was so shocked. But I was like, you just do your thing and your audience finds you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to tap dance for some audience I think I want.
Yeah, I'm going to have to completely agree with Kyle, because I'm not encouraging people to sign up for my OnlyFans, although that would be fantastic. Half of my content has nothing to do with what you would consider traditional porn. I have baking videos. I have me doing yoga. I have me, they may be sexier than what you would see on YouTube because I might be wearing a bikini top, but it's really is more about being authentic and showing a side of you that fans can connect with. That's not just, I had, I was aroused and I needed to see your stuff so I can get there, so.
Although that's what they want to connect with.
Well, there's that too. If especially with those kinds of platforms, if you're putting up content every single day or multiple times a day, there's a threshold where that becomes overkill. And fans, I think, like Kyle was saying, really want to connect to you as a person these days, especially the current generation of the new adult consumers. They really want to connect with the person that they're spending their money on. In a way that's not just, I signed up for a subscription to Playboy TV.
It's interesting, just a sort of last thought on that is that it's interesting how there's this split in the road between people really wanting real and things like Belle Delphine, where it's clearly not real and it's clearly ridiculously not real. But
a lot of people don't know who she is, but she looks like she should be porn, but she's not. She's making fun of.
She's teasing the trolls, basically. She exists in this space where mostly men who get really hyped up on porn think that every female in any context is, just that close to being porn. And so she's decided to, profit off that in a humorous way. But it's just interesting. It's interesting because what Kelly says is true. Watching her bake would be someone's really good content, and watching Belle do weird things with gamer bathwater and all that is also someone's really good. So that's how we get it done.
I think there's because we're seeing this kind of content, sort of the self-produced thing, even on network TV now, you can spy something that's not real, like more immediately than you've ever been able to. So I think part of it is also just, if you're bullshitting, you're going to get sniffed out.
We need a term for that. It's like the uncanny valley, isn't it? It's like the uncanny valley.
Yeah. But there's also, an obligation on the performer side to share with their fans what is real and what is fantasy real,
Right.
And saying that, hey, we can do both things. I have fans that want me to dress up in a panda onesie and do things for them, as much as I have fans who really enjoy just watching me stretch and do yoga. So
yeah, how you eat a banana is probably a lot different.
Well, for either group.
Fantasy real. Yeah.
It's a lot of it is really just seeing how each consumer wants to consume and how they want to interact, and everybody is different. I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned since not working within the studio system, is that everybody wants something different.
That's interesting.